Welcome to our first of 12 financial literacy webinars presented by Gainbridge, a digital platform of financial products and member of Group 1001, an insurance holding company. My name is Cheryl Lala Chavez, and I am the Director of Training and Career Coaching at Parity, a movement for equal pay in the sports sponsorship market. I will be joined each month by Lauren Williams, a four-time Olympian and certified financial planner. In each of our episodes, we'll also have a Parity ambassador. This month, we're welcoming Madeline Kopp, a professional runner and digital creator. Welcome, you two.
I'm looking forward to this.
As am I.
Awesome. Sounds good. So, today we're going to be talking about financial goals. Lauren, what was your motivation behind financial goal setting when you were an athlete, and how did that experience propel you into your career today as a certified financial planner?
Well, one of the biggest things around the goal setting part of being an athlete for me was I knew that my career was not going to go on forever. So I was under the impression that I was like, this money is great for now, but what happens next? I didn't really plan on earning in this way. I don't know what's coming. It's quite fluctuating. So I need to be able to set some goals to understand what it is that I want to do in the future. And so I needed to enlist the help of a financial professional. So that's kind of what led me to wanting to become a financial professional and give back to professional athletes and help them understand how to better organize their finances. It was kind of not clear how to goal set initially.
Yeah. And so Maddie, bringing you in as a professional runner now, where are you in the financial goal setting process currently?
Yeah, I'm actually kind of in like a similar range to like that, where I'm like starting to be like, I need to kind of figure out long-term like sustainability of what I'm doing. And throughout the last couple of years, as I've been running, like my life has kind of taken like different forms, and like my finances have been different throughout the whole process because of that, based on like what else was going on. But right now, currently, I think my goals are shifting a little bit more to like long-term, like I said, and like saving, or just figuring out how I'm going to be able to afford life, as opposed to just like I'm doing what I'm doing right now, make not like paycheck to paycheck, making it another day, but it's just been so much more like short-term goals, like what I need in this moment, and I'm kind of shifting that mindset a little bit like right now.
Gotcha. So it sounds like, financial education is something that's big, and, Gainbridge has a financial education center on their website. I'm going to put the link in the chat as well. When you go to the actual website, there are 8 educational modules. The last one is called the personalized playlist, and that's the thing that we're going to be talking about a little bit today. It provides free information to kind of start setting your goals for the year. There are 4 questions. The first question is, of course, just kind of starting out, what is your financial goals? And then they go into other questions like, how far ahead do you plan? How difficult is it to cover your expenses? How do you pay for emergency expenses? And then at the end, after you've answered these 4 questions, very quick, you'll be redirected to a page kind of like this one. I'll just kind of put that up here so you can all see it. But essentially, it will give you kind of like a personalized playlist that is custom for you and helping you to achieve your goals for 2022. Maddie, I know that you've been using this a little bit. How was it to use the personalized playlist? What did it, identify for you?
Yeah, it was really straightforward and easy, which I liked. And then it kind of walked me through some things that I didn't know about. Like it told me that I needed to start focusing on like credit and savings. And this is something that I definitely knew. But then it kind of like, broke down some of the more complex topics for me. And at the end gave me kind of like a direction to start going. So I actually found it super helpful, just because I spent a lot of time being confused with things. Like figuring out credit for the first time was so confusing, and this kind of broke it down. So that was good.
That's good to hear. So talking about kind of confusion, Lauren, when you're working with someone like Maddie, who's beginning kind of their savings and credit strategy, what advice or information do you think is crucial?
Well, I think, Maddie brought up a really good point in the idea that there's so many things going on. It's like, what do I tackle first? And so I really appreciate that about the playlist, that it kind of gave like, hey, here's this thing you might not be thinking about, and here's something to focus on for now, and then you can move on to the next. But as I'm thinking through, what's important for my clients, I would say, Maddie, to be thinking about, credit is a means to take on debt. So it's important to understand how credit works, but it's also important to understand, what you might need credit for. And so I know you mentioned talking about long-term and thinking about, things down the road as opposed to thinking in short term. One of the big things that young professionals are generally thinking about right now is like home buying. And that is usually kind of more of a long-term goal because you have to save tens of thousands of dollars for that down payment. And then you'll be paying on it over a 30-year period. But credit is a very important piece of that puzzle. So, there's so many different things that can become crucial, but just taking that one little bite-sized thing and saying like, okay, let me get an understanding of what it is, what I might need it for, and how it applies to what goals I have, I think is an important piece.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and getting back to some of these questions that were in the personalized playlist, Lauren, how far ahead should athletes plan their financial goals?
Oh, so this is a tough one because, as athletes, we can be kind of nearsighted in the sense that, what's coming up, this Olympic Games, what's coming up, this championship or this competition. And we don't want to plan beyond that. But at the same time, we know we have the ability to be able to plan kind of long term in the sense that we have to do great practices to create great competition or great competitions to be able to get to that championship. And so we are used to doing long-term planning because we know that we need to build a strong foundation in order to be on top when we get to where we want to go. So when I think about it, I always like to make kind of a short-term goal in the sense of, what do I want to accomplish in the next 6 months? And then a kind of midterm goal, like what does my life look like 2 years from now? And then long-term, it's hard to really think, 20 or 30 years down the road for retirement and things like that, especially if you're at the beginning of your sports career. So maybe like a 4-year goal would be a long-term goal as you kind of, start to map things out. And then as time goes on, maybe you can start to stretch that out a little bit. But that 6-month goal, I think, is a really important thing. What do I want to accomplish in the next 6 months? And then working backward to say, what do I need to do each month in order to be able to get to where I want to go 6 months from now?
I think that just like breaking it down to chunks of like 6 months even seems like so long term to someone like me, or like me when I was like an earlier, like a younger first starting being a professional athlete. Like that would seem long term to me. Like 6 months from now, I have to like have like a plan for that. So it's like kind of good to hear that there's not just tomorrow and retirement. There's like an in between that I should be thinking about.
Yeah, it's super duper important to be able to say like, what's realistic for me? I know I definitely thought I was invincible at the beginning of my career. Like, I'm never going to stop running track. Like, I don't understand why anybody's planning for the long term. This is going to go great forever.
Right.
Then the reality starts to set in, and then you start to realize like, okay, like let me pivot in the way that I'm thinking.
And I think also like, depending on your situation, but it definitely depends on the sport, and especially with track, because there's just so many different like structures that you could be like working in. It's hard to save. Like it's hard to even imagine putting money to the side depending on like what structure you're in. So thinking about it from a 2-month or like 6-month perspective kind of makes it a little bit more manageable. Like I just know I was feeling so like overwhelmed at the thought of even having to save any of this money that I was making at certain times because it was so like minimal, or I was just, doing what I could to run.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think, it's interesting because I think as athletes, like we're really good at goal setting, right? Like we're really good at like, okay, we're goal oriented. We want to have this goal. We want to win this championship, whatever it is. We're really great when it comes to that. But then we think about our finances and all of a sudden there's like some miss there, or can be. So Lauren, is there something to help athletes in terms of just goal setting and being able to say like, okay, I want to do this for the next 2 or 6 months, or anything that you use?
Well, what I like is that Gainbridge asked a lot of questions, and I think questions are a key piece of being able to back into goals in an area that you're not as familiar with. Like you said, we're really good at setting goals for what we want to achieve on our field of play, but goal setting other ways is like, okay, let me think about what do I want for, where do I want to live in the off season? That might be a good question. And it's like, okay, the off season is coming. I do need somewhere to live. I want to go back home to where my family is, or I want to go to where my partner is, or I want to, be able to stay close to where training is. And now you're like, okay, I now know what the cost of living is in that area. How can I find short-term housing, in that off season, or how can I find someone to stay with? And now you start backing into it. So asking a series of questions about what am I trying to accomplish, and then putting a monetary value next to that. Like, okay, housing costs X number of dollars. Or I want to go on a trip in the off season might be something you want to do. That's a goal that you're setting. Now we can back into let me put $100 aside to make sure I have, $1,000 by the time that the trip comes around, and I can pay for that without credit card debt. So really just asking a series of questions about what you want for yourself will help you put something next to the monetary side of things, and then decide what you need to do next.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. And, as Maddie mentioned, savings is hard, right? Maddie, you had mentioned that, right? So what about in terms of savings and helping athletes to save? Do you have any tips there?
Yes, I think that the key thing is to, one, create the habit of saving. So there's not too little to save. And like you said, Maddie, I know you mentioned like there was a period where not that much income was coming in. So it's like, I just got to like stay alive.
Right.
Forget about saving. Like we're in
Yeah.
survival mode here. But if you can, even in those moments, set aside something, 50 cents, $1, and it seems minimal. You're like, oh, what a waste of my time, sort of thing. But creating that habit is the same way that we build our foundation as athletes. Showing up to practice each and every day. When practice sucks, when you're sore, when you're tired, you would continue to show up. You don't always get a great, return on whatever you put in that moment. It's the same way. It's like, 50 cents doesn't feel like a lot, but actually doing it, building the foundation month after month, you're like, okay, I can legitimately save $1 now. And so on and so forth, so that when more money comes in, it feels easier. Like I'm already used to the habit of putting something aside. Let me just put a little bit more aside. And we take for granted how mental aspects of doing things like that can really help you propel yourself forward and get to your savings goal.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, Maddie, is that helpful? Does that resonate with you, or do you see some challenges to that?
No, that resonates so much because I definitely have been like, I can't save anything, but it totally makes sense to build it as a habit. And you're so right. That's literally what we do. That's like what we're, trained to do for everything in our sport. So it's actually resonates really well. I liked that analogy. It's good.
Yeah. And so, Maddie, as a current professional runner, what do you see as challenges in terms of like managing your expenses? So we talked about savings, but what about like managing your expenses?
I think savings is the biggest thing, but it is also, depending on where I am at different times of the past few years, it was, I'm trying to think, like, I guess just finding what's sources of income to even have, because sometimes you have to like work, like how often are you going to work? Is it getting in the way of like training? Do you have a contract right now? Do you have other sponsorships? Like there was just so many different things sort of available, and sometimes you didn't know where to start or what to do or how to even structure that. So since there's just so many different shapes it can take, that's kind of been like a challenge, if that makes any sense.
No, I think so. Total sense.
Yeah. Yeah, Lauren, what about you? When you were playing, does that, have same feeling, I guess, in terms of managing expenses?
Yeah, because there's so much changing in the moment as an athlete. And so, like I said, it could go from staying at home with a parent to staying with a roommate to I need to, to be the best athlete possible. I need to live over here across the country with this coach, and I have to come up with some sort of housing cost because I don't know anyone in this city. And so, I've heard of athletes like staying in hostels and things like that in order to be able to just like be where they want to be. But expenses are ever changing because life is ever changing, and you're just going with what's happening in the moment as an athlete. So fluctuating expenses is just like a part of what comes with the territory, but it doesn't create any stability for us. And it can be quite overwhelming, especially when, like you said, you're trying to put your best foot forward performance wise. And you're also trying to be responsible in the form of like, not taking on credit card debt or not overspending, but not having a lot coming in. So the biggest thing I usually recommend in that regard is to try to think outside of the box. As much as you can, plan ahead. But like you said, know that you might have to pivot. So having something set aside so that you can at least pivot to that next city or, the next situation that is going to be better for you to be able to compete is important. So that's where that like 50 cents we were just talking about, it does add up over time. You might have, $500 or $600 saved up, and it's better than not having anything, so that it can at least give you a launch pad to be able to get to the next place. But then once you get there, like, okay, what can I do outside of the box? And we're so lucky to be living in a digital world. COVID took us, we were already headed digital, but then COVID took us next level digital. So ways to be able to earn income, now have a lot more flexibility, and that would allow athletes to be able to earn in a way that's, not traditional, can fit in between practices, or you can be even working for someone in another city or another state while getting ready to prepare for your sport or your competition and trying to make ends meet.
Yeah, I think that's amazing advice, Lauren. And so, if you talking to your former athlete self, now that you've learned all this information, right, as a certified financial planner, is there anything you would do differently? Like if you could go back?
Ooh, I would save more for sure. I was not a great saver, and it wasn't that I was a big spender, but I didn't really understand what it meant to save. And I think that is a thing, like I said, that we take for granted. Like, what does that actually mean? How do you do it? There's not financial literacy taught in school, and sometimes we're embarrassed to ask, what is the best thing I should be doing here? You get a big check-in, like 10K or something from some big competition, and it feels like so much money, especially if you're fresh out of college or a couple years out. You were trying to make $1,000 a month work at one point, and now you get one check for 10,000. You're like, woohoo, I made it. But we don't realize that it might be 6 months before another check comes in, and what expenses are related to that. And like I said, what other pivots might I have to make? So I wish I would have had someone to speak to me about the various expenses related to my work, and then stretching them out over at least a course of a year. So, that check came in March, like, what does it look like to try to make that check work till next March? Yes, there may be more money coming in, but what if nothing else comes in? Let's build a budget based on this one check, and see if we can make it work. And then we feel like, okay, now I have stabilized income. Or let's, to make the math round, say it was over the next 10 months, I got $1,000 a month. Okay, let me build a budget based on that. And then if I get extra prize money or extra competition dollars coming in, I can start to think about saving. I can start to think about, other things I need to do to level up from a competition standpoint. Maybe I need a massage therapist, or I need a nutritionist, but it's like, I got these baseline things in place, and this is what I'm keeping this money for. I wasn't doing that. I was like, oh, $10,000 is here and I need this thing now. And you go off and you spend it. And like I said, it wasn't so much that it was frivolous, but it was like, maybe I would get a massage every week for a while. And I probably needed to do like every other week until, because I didn't know what was coming next. So it's like, I used it on something responsible, but maybe I overused it, or I didn't really think through how to best use those dollars.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so when you're thinking about, being an athlete and visiting or revisiting financial goals, how often should athletes be kind of looking at their financial portfolio and their outlook and kind of revisiting these goals?
I would say it makes sense depending on how long. So if you made a 6-month goal, then you should be checking in on that goal weekly. If you made a year-long goal, then you should be checking in on those goals monthly. So, you kind of go back to the next, time frame prior to. If you made a 5-year goal, then annually you should be checking in on that goal. It's kind of like just breaking it down into small increments to be able to say, like, when am I going to evaluate whether or not I'm reaching my goals? The same way we don't, you go to practice, you don't go the next day and say like, okay, am I ready to break the world record yet? You're kind of going to a few practices. You might go through a few competitions, and then you kind of reevaluate and see like, okay, 3 weeks ago I did this workout and it went great. And now 2 weeks later, it's not going that great. And then, 3 more weeks later, oh, look at the time difference that I'm, able to do. You're kind of constantly reevaluating as time passes, but you don't want to be doing it on a daily basis, because then you kind of overwhelm yourself.
Yeah, Maddie, how does that sound to you? I mean, a 6-month goal, you're checking in weekly. What do you think? Is that doable?
You said that and I was like, oh gosh, I need to get on things. But it sounds like something that, kind of like you were saying earlier, would become a habit if I, started doing it. And I would definitely see it paying off. So it seems like something that sounds like an obstacle now, but would be crazy beneficial, and I should start doing it.
Is there a goal that you set recently?
Like finance? Not officially. In probably the way that you were thinking. My major goal.
There's no wrong answers here, Maddie.
My major goal at the beginning of this year, this season or whatever was just to feel way more financially stable than I had in the past, because I did kind of feel this pressure, especially as I got older, and like I had to take on my own healthcare, and I had to like start doing all these things that I didn't have to do before. I started to feel this like overwhelming pressure. So my goal is not like a great goal in the sense that it's not measurable. It's not, well, it should be, but right now it's not. It was literally just to be like, okay, to be in like a good spot. So,
No, I think that's something excellent we can work with. Like the idea is, like you said, so the goal is stability. It is absolutely measurable, because I mean, you think about like how you feel. If you feel unstable in the moment, then you know what that feels like, and you know what it feels like to feel stable. So to go ahead and create stability is the thing that you're trying to do. So then it's like, well, where can we check in order to be able to create stability? I would say like the first thing to think about is, what does it mean to be stable? Does that mean, I don't have to move out of this apartment? I don't have to, stay on my friend's couch? What does the word stability mean to you? And then looking at, okay, well, now I know what that means to me. There's a baseline here. If it's to stay in my own apartment, then I know how much does it cost to live in this apartment? I need to be here, I need to be here for the next year, or my lease is not up until this date. Okay, if I had 2 months ahead, I would feel more stable because I know I don't have to move out next month. And then I would have more wiggle room in order to be able to, find the following month's rent, as an example. So I think the first thing you should do is decide what it means to be stable. And then you can, like I said, put a number to that and kind of work from there with creating that stability.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great. And Lauren, I've heard you talk so much about like a money mindset. What exactly is that in terms of like a definition? Like, I know you talk about it a lot, but how do you define that?
Yeah, your money mindset is the way that you think about money. So we can have a positive money mindset, we can have a negative money mindset, but a lot goes into creating a positive money mindset. And there's a lot that people are not thinking of why they may have a negative money mindset. And so just like with our sports, we need to bring a great game face to whatever it is that we're getting ready to do. And if you are in your own head, it doesn't matter how good you've trained and how ready you are to be able to compete, you can go out there and lay an egg. We have all seen it happen. Like, they are fit, they were fast last week, and then they're just not doing what they needed to be doing. It's all in your head. We know that it is 80% head or 80% mental and 20% physical as it pertains to being able to compete on your field of play. So with money mindset, you want to be thinking about, how can I get rid of the negative thoughts that may be holding me back from reaching my goals? And so when I think about money mindset, it's like going back to, what have I experienced in the past that keeps coming up for me? Where am I right now? And do I feel good about that place that I'm in, or do I not feel good about it? Who am I surrounding myself with in this moment? And are they contributing to me having a negative or a positive money mindset? Because it's super duper important. If everyone around you is buying fancy shoes and lattes and drinking alcohol, whatever it is that those things are that are super duper expensive, and you're balling on the budget, and you just feel the pressure of that, or you're succumbing to it, or you're just feeling like you're less than enough because everyone's doing something that you're not doing, that's going to affect your money mindset. It's going to reinforce negative things that you already have going on. And then it's not going to allow you to create abundance and to create new money and to have creativity so that you can get new income. So you definitely want to deal with, like, am I in a negative space or a positive space from a money mindset standpoint? And then decide how you can shift that mindset to something that is more positive if you're not in a great place.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that definition. I think that's really empowering. Maddie, does that help in terms of, creating some more stability for your financial goals and just kind of thinking about money mindset?
Yeah, it actually does. It makes me think of just, like normal mindset things where it's like wherever your head is kind of like what happens. So I guess I could take that, because I try to implement that into other parts of my life. So I feel I've never thought about taking that and putting it into like my finances or my money goals or whatever. So that's like really interesting to think about, that like I can choose to think about it in a certain way and like create essentially like the financial stability that I need just by, you know, thinking about it instead of like feeling like overwhelmed or negative about it.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really good point. Like you said, it's applicable in all aspects of life. And that's the thing. Like we have so many tools as athletes that others don't necessarily use on a daily basis, but we know like mindset things. We know goal setting. We know how to persevere. We know how to be disciplined. It's just a matter of taking the skills that we have and being able to transpose them into other aspects of our life. And the money part of our life is no different. I know, I think the thing you were referring to, like the famous saying is like your watch your thoughts because they become your words, watch your words because they become your actions, watch your actions, they become your habits, and so on and so forth. I don't know the rest of it, but it's so important with, you know, money mindset. Like, you know, those thoughts become what you say. And if you're like, I'm broke, and that's a mindset that becomes an action. You start behaving broke. And that becomes a habit. You know, we don't want broke to be a habit. We want abundance.
I've definitely done that.
Yeah. And I think that relates a lot to career too, because, you know, I've been helping a lot of athletes in career coaching as well. And it's always like this mindset kind of moving from competition to business. And there's so many transferable skills, as you mentioned, Lauren, in terms of just career and finances that you can take forward from your athlete experience.
For sure. Absolutely. And that was one of the things that was really hard for me, was figuring out, what do I want to be when I grow up after sport? But in addition to that, like, how do I put that on paper? We tend to say like, oh, this is not transferable. It doesn't make sense. I don't have any work experience. Once again, it's a mindset versus getting the words on paper of saying like what skills you do have and how they make you a really good worker. How, you know, we're coachable. We're athletes. We're absolutely coachable. And that is something that is valuable in the workplace. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Cheryl.
Yeah, I think it goes both ways too. Like when you're an athlete, you're like, I'm good at this. This is what I do. This is what I'm always going to be doing. And you like, especially when you're around other people who also think that way, it's hard to, you know, break out of that and be like, no, I can make money this way too, or I'm going to be able to do this as well. And I wish I had gotten more creative, I think, earlier on and tried to structure my like athletic life around figuring all that out instead of the other way around.
Yeah, I think that's also a good point about the idea of like identity, and like we put everything into the athlete identity, not realizing like, hey, there's so many other pieces of me. I'm multifaceted. I need to lean into those. We kind of get into this shell, and then we're like, we're having an identity crisis. Like, who am I beyond this athlete? We intuitively know that we're more than that, but we kind of get stuck in the trap of, like I said, narratives that tell us that is the thing that we are, and that's the only thing that we need to be focusing on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's never too late, right? It's never too late to try new things. I think that's one thing that I always tell athletes as well is like, you know, if you have new business ideas, new things that you want to go after competition, go for it. Now's the time, right? It's never too late. And I think that's the same thing with finances probably as well. It's never too late to kind of start thinking about your finances and planning. Well, I want to thank you two for such a lively and engaging conversation on finances and just kind of talking about it with that athlete mindset, bringing this conversation front and center. You know, appreciate both of you joining me and just kind of the candid and vulnerable conversation. So thank you, Lauren and Maddie. I also want to thank our sponsor, Gainbridge, a digital platform providing direct access to trusted financial products and free financial literacy education, giving your future a boost. Obviously, this conversation was all around the personalized playlist, so there's free education there, and just go to their website and check it out. It's some amazing information that Lauren and I will be presenting monthly. Want to thank you all again, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Next month.